Welcome to Protecting Your Assets, the show about protecting people, property, and most importantly, protecting your ass. I'm your host, Luciano, and I'd like you to join me for a fast-paced and often fiery discussion about security issues with my co-host, Brian the Angry Man Claman. Whether we're piercing the veil of security, talking your duty of care, or raving about the latest technology, we'll share our thoughts on the issues, the trends that are impacting security today and into the future. So grab a coffee and join us for our latest podcast, and don't forget to like and follow us on our sponsor's website, brianclaman.com. And now let's talk about protecting your assets. Hello and welcome to Protecting Your Assets. I'm your host, Luciano Cedrone, and with me is Brian the Angry Man Claman. We are on to episode 30 now, so it's a bit of a milestone for us, and we have been away for a bit, busy with life's priorities, I guess, but we're back, and we're excited to be back. We've got some interesting guests lined up in future episodes, but today we're going to be talking about security's role in getting back to the office. With COVID now sort of under control in some places of the world, and companies looking to bring back their employees, we wanted to focus on what security's been doing or what they can do to help make that that return to work a little more palpable. So with me, Brian the Angry Man Claman as usual, and I'm going to turn it over to you as usual to talk about what's keeping you up these days.
Okay, thanks, Luke. It's nice to be back. I just want to correct you on something where you said we haven't had an opportunity to do recordings at the frequency like because of life's priorities. As I've mentioned to you many times, this podcast is the priority.
Yes.
And you've got to get it through your head. I mean, we're up to 600,000 listeners a session. You got to push it to 700,000. So we're making progress. So what's keeping me up at night? Again, you know what? I think I've been consistent the whole year, but COVID. But things are good. But just a couple of things that I find interesting, really interesting. And it's, you know, last year at this time when COVID first struck, we were all scared. We were all praying for a vaccine, a cure. We were told it may take years and years till we got a vaccine, and we lucked out. We got a fantastic vaccine. The proof is in the pudding. The numbers are down. They say this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. But what I find really comical is that the amount of resistance, not only to the vaccine, but to employers saying that you've got to be vaccinated, and if you're not, you've got to be tested. And there's two examples that just come to mind. The Human Rights Commission of Ontario just recently ruled that it is not a violation of your human rights if an employer puts the condition on your return to work. And I think that was really important because I think we saw it with the unions and the TTC union. I woke up this morning and they said, there's no way we're going to allow our members to disclose their vaccine status. And then the human rights ruling comes out, plus a lot of very prominent labor lawyers said that an employer can make this requirement and can terminate you if you don't do it. And then they flip-flopped at 4 o'clock today, telling their members that they have to disclose. So it's really interesting, just the political spin. You know, we've lost focus on getting back to normal, it seems. And now politics is coming. It started off with the government, politicians, and now the unions. It's just a lack of transparency and honesty, which is very depressing to me.
Yeah, I agree. When I saw that this morning, I couldn't believe the union was taking that position, and it was beyond disappointing. I'm like, here we are, finally sort of in the stretch run. People are getting vaccinated. We've got a solution to get us back in the workplace. And all of a sudden you got some clown saying, oh no, let's not share it, you know, make life difficult for everybody when it's just let's get it over with. Get it done.
And we're in the homeward stretch. We're in the ninth inning. Like, things are looking good. You know, Ontario was saying that their worst projections were 8,000 new cases a day. We're averaging about 500 to 400. We're on a downwards trend. The health ministry on today's briefing said they are cautiously optimistic that this thing may be behind us. Now, that's not all of Canada, because Alberta's falling apart, and Florida's falling apart, and Texas is falling apart, and BC has trouble, Saskatchewan has trouble, but Ontario doesn't. So we're making progress. I just find it so interesting that, like, restaurants, okay, they were dying, and it was tragic what we were doing to small business. And we've got small business opened up now, and they just got to say, do you have your vaccine certificate? So maybe they won't get 100% of their customers, but they'll get 80% or 90%. That's better than what it was last year. We have such a short memory in the Western world. You know, we would have done anything last year to make this go away. And now that's getting better. We have forgotten, and we want to take our masks off and not get the vaccines. You know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. This is just insane. But
Yeah. The only thing I'll add to that is the news about the hockey players and the basketball players.
Oh
which
God.
again, it's so hypocritical. You know, if I've got to get vaccinated to go see you play, chase a stupid ball around, or throw a puck around, you know what? You can damn well get vaccinated as well. I don't understand the government's position that it's okay for them to do it, but all of us have to comply. That just sends all the wrong signals. It's got a lot of people pissed off. I certainly ain't going to watch that garbage anymore. I'm sick and tired of this two-class system that we're developing. That's basically what they're doing.
Well, and I told you not to vote for Prime Minister Fancy Socks, and I told you this would happen. But guys like you, that sort of left of center, or in your case, very, very left of center.
Yes, that's me.
This is what happens. Yeah, that is disgusting. The messaging has been skewed and messed up from the beginning. And we've talked in other episodes about the importance when you're managing a crisis or an emergency to be consistent with your messaging. Think about the words you're going to say them consistently, and when you have to pivot all at the same time. This has been another disaster. The government of Canada invoked, I think, a national exemption for basketball players. Really? We had no trouble putting mom and pop shops out of business, but the guy that makes $27 million a year. In fact, you know, I was reading, and I forgot what team it is. There's one particular NBA team that has several guys that aren't vaccinated that are going to be allowed to Canada, but they can't even play in their home city. We're a bunch of morons.
It's ridiculous, and it really irks me because when you think about it, a guy who's making minimum wage is expected to get vaccinated or get fired, and he may lose $250 a day that he needs to make the mortgage payments or put food on the table. These clowns are missing. One of them is going to be missing $330,000 a game. So they got plenty of cash that they can rely on. It doesn't matter to them if they miss a game if they're not vaccinated. So give me a break, man. Like, let's put up our socks. If we're in this together, then that means everybody's on board, not just the poor people and then the higher paid athletes. That's ridiculous.
And at $330,000 a game, that's plenty incentive to get vaccinated, or at the very least, get the tests or whatever the requirements are. It's just beyond belief. And I want to be clear to our listeners, Mr. Cedrone and I have not turned into anti-vaxxers or protesters with masks. But the problem is there's a lot of decent people in this country that have worked hard to get us to where we are and have suffered greatly. And when you've got these fat cats, being treated specially, and the mom and pop store in the little community I live in, they go under, people in the path, the merchants in the path that have just gone bankrupt, that will never return, the stores. And then I hear about NBA stars, just disgusting, and shame on you, Government of Canada.
It is disgusting.
But these are the people that brought us the rescue of the two Michaels. They worked tirelessly. And it's just a coincidence that the Michaels came home when Miss Wing Wang Chu, or whatever her name is, I'm sorry I get that wrong every time, gets released. She had hardship in her $20 million mansion. Thank you, Government of Canada.
You are lucky that we're trying to keep these to a half-hour episode, because that is really something that ticks me off. And the gall of our Prime Minister to stand there as they come off the plane to give them a warm hug as if he did something. Oh my God, I would have punched him in the face.
And you know what? His sleeves are rolled up. He wasn't wearing a jacket. What, the posturing, the insincerity, and people buy that dribble.
Yep.
I mean, these poor folks have been let down by their country. They were in jail for 2 years or 3 years. And he doesn't even have the decency to come properly dressed. He's the Prime Minister of Canada. If you come over to my house for a beer or supper and your sleeves are rolled up, you're Luke, my buddy. If you're serving as a Prime Minister of Canada, I want you to look the part.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see when they come up, because they're going to eventually start talking to the press. It'll be interesting to see what their perspective is on that whole thing.
But they don't know any better. For all they know, Trudeau said we work tirelessly. That's all they know. They didn't see the newspaper. They're going to be really pissed when they find out the truth.
that she was on her mansion for
Yeah,
2 years, and
yeah.
and we even
Hostage,
allowed her family in. Remember that they made an exception for
yeah.
COVID to let her family visit.
Hostage diplomacy. Gotta
What
love
a
it.
joke. Anyway, let's move it along to the topic of the day, which is COVID related, but we're going to steer away from COVID specific information or issues and talk about security's role in getting us back to work. And I was downtown last week with some other clients, and it's still a ghost town. 11 o'clock, 11:30 in the afternoon by the Sky Dome, you would think it's pretty packed with. They got a bunch of road sidewalk cafes and restaurants, and I can count on my hand how many people were on that sidewalk. So we are still a long, long ways away from getting back to normal, as they like to say. But there's a lot that security can be doing, and that's what we're going to talk about on today's episode. So, Brian, let's open it up with your comments on that.
Well, you and I are still very connected with the senior security community in downtown Toronto, and especially in the financial district where the towers are and the path and all that infrastructure. And all my contacts and colleagues are telling me that it's still a zoo down there. It's sort of like a no-go zone. The syringes that are on the street, people defecating, the mental health issues, the homeless problems are just exasperated. And it's like anything else. I have a kayak and I go kayaking. My daughter is terrified of spiders. There are no spiders in my kayak, but when I leave it unattended for a week and I take it out, it's full of spiders. Well, the same type of thing. The downtown core has been disrupted. There's a unfortunate element, and people that are very marginalized have taken over, and it's not very pleasant. And one of the challenges to get people back, and this is what I'm hearing, is number one, people want to make sure it's safe in terms of COVID. People want to make sure that it's safe to go downtown. And I think security has a real important role, which is often not properly understood by the operators of big buildings or businesses. I think before we start having a return to normal and people going back downtown, we've got to create an environment which looks welcoming. And at present, it doesn't look welcoming. And until they do that, every other effort to get people back to work, I believe, is going to fail, or at least be hard won.
Yeah, it's not going to happen just because you say it's going to happen. And I remember one of our, I don't know if you were with me when we had a call with our former peers down there that we continue to speak with. But in particular, he was speaking about all the efforts that their property managers had done over the last 18 months to bring back business employees, right? They had marketing campaigns. They developed strategies on how to keep everybody safe. They've got protocols, policies, screening processes, all these things that they've spent a ton of money on and time and effort, and they push it out to their tenants, and there's no one biting.
No.
So there's a real apprehension in coming back to the workplace, and that's the concern. I think the other piece that I want to throw into the conversation is the fact that I think it's a real opportunity for security programs to reset with their employees as well. They've been out of the office now for almost 2 years. They've enjoyed, staying at home and not having to worry about carrying their badge or forgetting their ID or their passwords because everything's at the house. And so it should be, I would think, and I would hope that most security programs should be using it as an opportunity to at least refresh, if not reset their whole program. And, when those employees come back, get them to reread those policies, go through some training again, because 100% they've lost that knowledge, and it's going to cost you. The gaps will open up because of it.
Yeah, I think security's got to be at the forefront with others, such as HR, the IT
Yep.
people, because you've got to create a welcoming environment. And as it is, COVID has changed the way we live our lives, okay? And there's a real possibility, forget about all these security issues with the downtown cores right now. People may not want to go back to work. They don't want to go back to work. They want to work remotely. So I think we're in a paradigm shift the way things were. But the downtown cores are not going to die. They may not be, the financial district, if I'm not mistaken, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I think when we did the exercises, the emergency management exercises, is it like 500,000 people or 400,000 people in finance? Yeah. And so I don't think we're going to go back to 400,000, but we are going to go back to a healthy downtown. And I think this is a time to reset, as you said, and to recalibrate. We, as consultants, are seeing more and more clients are asking us to look at their programs, to review their programs. And I would suggest that it's probably more important than ever before, because before COVID, things were working as dysfunctional as security may have been. It still worked and it was not consequential. Now, when we do come back to work, it will be consequential. Could you imagine if finally the big banks and the big employers get their people to come back to work, and they got to go through a labyrinth of needles and people defecating things? How long is it going to last? So I really think security, I hope business leaders are bringing security to the table. I hope security leaders are injecting themselves to business leaders. I think there's got to be multidisciplinary teams with HR, with IT, with the wellness people, health and safety people. Security's got to be at the table. And unless they get all those boxes properly aligned, it's going to be very difficult to get a return to normal in the near term.
Yeah, it's got to be a team effort. Everyone's got to be at the table and have a voice to be able to speak to that. And getting back to the security concerns, I mean, you've hit on some of them. I've been down there now a few times in the last couple of weeks, and you see, tents everywhere. You see opioid issues cropping up in the news all the time. You've got shootings all the time in the city. Nothing like Chicago yet, but we have our fair share of homicides across the GTA. So those are all flags, I think, indicative of the decline in the environment down there, because people are missing, right? People aren't there anymore. So yeah, bad things start to happen and no one checks them. So they continue to happen and they fester, right? Because there's no one there to report it or to respond to it. So I think that's part of the problem.
It's not all bad news. You are aware of a project that we're involved in with a client that's building a new space in downtown Toronto. And, at a recent meeting, I was really impressed to hear the architects and the designers talk about how things are different now. They were talking about touch points. They were talking about, computer screens, public computer screens for wayfinding and things like that, where you'd press something, it would tell you where a particular office is, and saying that we got to do this differently because people aren't going to want to touch things. And they're looking at ways to use your smartphone in place of these common touchpad type things. And really, my takeaway was these people are forward thinking and they're saying things can't be the way it was. And we're building net new, so let's get it right. And we've been invited to help with the security piece of that. I think there's got to be a lot of innovative thinking. If there's a building, if there's a company, if there's a security manager thinks that people will be back to work in the spring or in January or February, and life is normal, they're going to fail, and they're going to fail miserably. I think they've got to start afresh. It's like a clean slate, and they got to say, what are the risks? There's physical risks, and there's mental and emotional risks. There's people are scared, for no reason, for real reasons, and there's physical security risks. And I think security has to be a lot more innovative in the months to come than we've been in the years before. And I think many of our counterparts are up for the challenge, but I think many of them also are not. And I think it behooves the employers of security programs to really make sure that their security leadership is on top of it, and they know what the threats are, and they know their role.
Well, yes, the guys we know are prepared for it. I would, I agree that they're competent, and they've got their work cut out for them, but they're up for the task. But we also know that a lot of security programs, like many other departments, have suffered under the COVID losses, and so we've seen departments shrink. We've seen personnel be let go. And so even though we're at a point where, as we're talking about, the security situation is riskier, we actually have less resources to deal with it, which is even more concerning, right? And when you think about the fact that they haven't been in their office for almost, over 18 months, almost 24 months now, come December, right? January, we're starting to knock on 2 years. Some people, like myself as a perfect example, when I started with my other employer, I didn't go to the office for the first 6-7 months, and since then I've probably been there a handful of times, never with the whole company in the office. So I don't know who those people are. I don't know who belongs there, who doesn't belong there. So expand that to anybody else who's going back to work downtown. All those banks, how much turnover have they had? How many people have they let go? How many people have they hired? And employees who are sitting at home during that time have never seen these people, They could be even bosses and peers that they've never actually met in person. And now you're going back to the office and you have no clue who they are, what they're like. It's a whole different set of parameters that cause risks, increased risks and potential problems for the company if it's not properly addressed before it starts.
And expanding on your point about a lot of security programs being decimated in terms of budget over the last year and a half, the situation is only exacerbated by the pressures on the public sector. And I give as an example when Ontario announced their vaccine passport requirement for restaurants and places of work. And I think it was Minister Elliott said that if there's not compliance, you're to call 911. And the police community and the Association of Chiefs of Police of Ontario said, no, don't call 911 because we don't have the capacity to deal with it. So building on that, you've got security programs that have been adversely affected. You got police unable to deal with the things they have to do. So it's a mistake if you think that, Bill Needles, our friend
Yes.
from Toronto Police, always said, I don't know why people think they're going to call us when we'll be there in 2 minutes. We would like to be there in 2 minutes, but it's more like 2 hours. Well, this is an example of that. So you've got a new normal where there's going to be real stressors, and then the resources you need to navigate have been decimated over the last year and a half. So I think you talked about this. This is a time to rebuild, to reassess, to relook at your budgets, your staffing models, and your policies and procedures. First thing. And the second thing is, how are we going to communicate with the stakeholders, with our employees, with our colleagues, and let them know how they can succeed in a new normal? And again, you said it, I said it. I think many security leaders are up for the task, but I think far more are not.
Right.
And because regrettably, I think there's some real superstars out there, and they're usually with the bigger corporations, but the smaller organizations don't have access to that type of talent. And I think it's going to be a challenge for them.
Yeah, and it really goes back to the basics in security planning is conducting it, starting with an assessment, right, of the current situation. You're going back to work. What does it look like? How many people are going to be in the building? What kind of departments are going to be in the building? What kind of work do you do? Understanding what the risks are coming back into the space, and then developing mitigation measures to fill those gaps. But if you don't do it, then you're just going to get caught with your pants down, right? If you just go into it thinking, oh, it'll just be like it was 2 years ago in 2019, you might be in for a rude awakening and some nasty surprises.
Yeah, I mean, I think that threat risk assessments usually have been done every 4 to 5 to 6 or 7 years. Well, you may have done one 2 years ago just before COVID. I would suggest to anyone that was listening to me, to my clients, time to do another, because the threat environment has changed and it's going to change the way you deliver services, protect organizations, brand and reputation. So, it amazes me how often we talk with a prospective client or just colleagues, and they want to put in a new security system or they want a new security program. When we say, well, what are the threats or risks you're trying to protect against? Well, you know what? Just security threats or risks. And we say, well, you got to step back a little bit and understand what the adversary is, what you're trying to protect against, and how many people just see that as an unnecessary expense. I would suggest if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get there. If you and I decide that let's go on vacation together, but I forget to tell you we're going to Montreal on October 14th, I'm not going to see you on October 14th in Montreal. That's what your threat risk assessment is. We have a security program that has an objective to keep us safe, but safe from what? If you don't take the time to understand what it is you're protecting against, the old things, laptop thefts and muggings and parking garages, they've always been here. They'll always be here. But there's things that we've never had to deal with that are now on the horizon. And I dare say most security programs really haven't considered it, or if they've thought about it, haven't re-engineered the program, haven't retrained the stakeholders. And that's going to be a challenge. And I just urge people in authority in business to think about that. Make sure that you're working with HR, you're getting ducks in order, you've got legal. Talk to your security people. And if you think it's above the ability of the security team you have, go look for talent on a consulting basis to help you. And I know, by the way, some really good consultants, but I won't mention any names.
I don't even want to continue. I think you summarized it really well. I do. You've encapsulated what our point was today, and that is to prepare for the eventual reopening of your premise and put some thought into it. Don't just cross your fingers and hope for the best, because all too often that just ends up going sideways on you. So really, I think that was a good conversation, Brian. I don't think we need to say anything else, but unless you got any closing points, I'm happy with the conversation we've had today, and hopefully our business listeners take it to heart, call in the resources they need, whether they're in-house or they contact people like yourself that can bring them that expertise, and assure them that they're on the path to they're on the right direction, heading in the right direction.
Well, I'm glad you agree with me. You'd be a fool not to agree with me. I've been carrying you for so long, so you're finally drinking the Kool-Aid. But yeah, I think this was a good session. I mean, it doesn't have to be a long session. I just think that there was time to procrastinate. I think the time is shrinking, and I think now's the time for action. So, I just want to end with that, saying now's the time for action. If you haven't thought about it, it's not too late, but think about it soon, because it will be too late if you're returning to work in October or December or January and you haven't figured out the security angle.
Well said, sir. And with that, I'm going to bid adieu to our listeners. Until next time, bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. That concludes this podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening and will join us in a couple of weeks for our latest episode. Please remember to like and follow us on our sponsor's webpage, brianclayman.com, where you can leave us your comments and suggest topics you'd like to hear about in future episodes. Until next time, thanks for listening, and don't forget to protect your assets.